So today I read a brief article by liberal partisan champion Paul Krugman, basically that to the effect that Ron Paul is insane and crazy, as is Mises and Hayek. And it was a very brief article. It was more of a blog post than anything else, and he didn't go into a lot of detail. He posted some links to where he was getting that argument from. To another economist, I don't remember his name. I believe he's another economist, I don't know. And the argument was absolutely silly. He said, Paul, like Hayek, Mises, and Marx, believe that the only kind of valuable money is a kind of money that requires human effort and sweat to produce. Now, when he listed Marx in there, I said, this doesn't seem to make very much sense. And then when he said that Mises and Hayek, he never said Austrian, by the way. I'm pretty sure that's the apropos thing to say, so my guess is he's not aware of the term. Anyway, it appears that he believes that they believe in a labor theory of value because this is what he describes, and this would make sense for him to then throw Marx in there. What's interesting about this is that anybody who even spends 45 seconds reading the Wikipedia article on any of those people or Austrian economics will know that obviously they don't believe in a labor theory of value. In fact, they have spent an inordinate amount of time refuting and disparaging the labor theory of value. Obviously, Austrians believe in the subjective theory of value, and believing that is what leads them to, well, that's one of the foundations that eventually, that's not the reason in and of itself, but they are against fiat monies for other reasons, namely that they, I don't know, hurt the poor and distort the economy and cause depressions and recessions and make some people wealthy relative to others by virtue of their proximity to the printing press. Anyway, this was the extent of Krugman's argument, basically, which doesn't have a lot of merit to it. But I think, again, what is so interesting is here, why does Paul Krugman hate Ron Paul so much? You know, on the right, Ron Paul is considered a left-wing lunatic, or at least a libertarian lunatic. He's against the wars in a way as forceful as even the most principled people on the left. Dennis Kucinich, Ralph Nader, Mike Gravel, none of those people could feasibly claim to be more anti-war than he is. Maybe at best they are on parity with him, and they are outliers. They are the conscience in that respect to the Democratic Party and to liberals in general. The vast majority of liberals, including the president, are blood-stained, warmongering, killing maniacs. And the only people who think otherwise are people who pay absolutely no attention. I know that there are liberals out there who think that the war in Iraq actually ended. No, it didn't. It hasn't. And it likely never will. And if you haven't noticed, we've added at least half a dozen other wars under our belt. Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Uganda, Central African Republic, Sudan, that we know of, Pakistan in a big way. And that's the crazy one, because Pakistan is... it's not playing with fire, that's playing with plutonium. And I think it was the first or second day he was in office, he started launching cruise missile strikes into Pakistan. The country is on the verge of falling apart. And it would be the worst breakdown we've probably seen this century. And Obama's warmongering is being... But anyway, doesn't Krugman at any point, you know, concede that, okay, I disagree with Paul on economics, fair enough, but at least he's got some sense when it comes to foreign policy and war? No, he doesn't say that. What about the war on drugs? A lot of liberals think that at the very least marijuana should be legal, at least medical marijuana. Now, they're kind of wishy-washy when it comes to the hard drugs, which they're more dangerous than marijuana, but they're actually far less dangerous than, say, cigarettes or alcohol, at least in terms of the number of people that they kill. I know if we change the criterion, I guess you could say you or I could drink a can of beer and be okay, but not inject a can of heroin, we probably wouldn't be okay. I don't know. But in terms of the number of people they kill, they're not any worse. in any event, Ron Paul is very progressive and liberal when it comes to drugs, more so than most liberals are. Well, much more so than most liberals are. Does Paul Krugman ever say, "Thank you, Ron Paul, you may be a little wacky when it comes to believing in a labor theory of value and money, but thank you for favoring an end to the prosecution of the war on drugs"? Does he ever say that? No. What about civil liberties? You know, this is something that both parties kind of say they believe in. On one or two of the amendments, the Democrats are a little bit better. On one or two of the amendments, the Republicans are better. Second Amendment. If you can hear me, Republicans are definitely better on the Second Amendment. But Ron Paul, no one can criticize his stance on civil liberties. That's well, yes, they do, because sometimes they don't understand his federalism and they don't like federalism. But he is a strong proponent. I mean, he's the one in the debate saying torture is wrong, it's illegal, and it doesn't work. Where's Paul Krugman saying, oh, he had some sense? He never does. Whenever he references Paul, he's a right-wing person like all the Republicans, and this is just absurd. Not even the idiotic Republicans are so dumb as to assume that Ron Paul is similar to the other Republicans. Now, to their discredit, a lot of them are against Ron Paul, and they don't like the differences he has with the Republican Party, but at least they're smart enough to recognize that there are differences, and then intellectually honest enough, and that's quite a concession to their normal behavior, to acknowledge that there's a difference there. Paul Krugman can't do this, and a lot of liberals can't do this. They just say they're all the same when they're obviously not, and they don't even concede even the things where he agrees with them. And I think this is very characteristic of many, many liberals. Not all, not the most principled, not the most ideological. So the Ralph Naders, the Dennis Kuciniches, who's that guy who writes for Salon.com, who's always on anti-war radio? Greensberg, some Jew, lives in Brazil. I forget his name. You know, there's a couple of them, and there's a couple blogs who said we should vote for Ron Paul, but by and large, they don't care about his anti-war stance or his anti-drug stance or his civil liberty stance. All they want, they like those things, but they want those things from big government. And if big government along the way butchers thousands of people, that's no big deal. They can live with that, and they will applaud that to the nth degree. And I know with Krugman specifically, he believes in this whole bogus aggregate demand Keynesian bullshit, and so he has an economic reason for thinking that war is good. Most liberals aren't even aware of that theory, and they don't think that war is for an economic good, although most of them probably do believe, as do most Republicans, that World War II ended the Depression, which is, I'd have to rank as perhaps at least in the top 3 most horrible myths that exist, at least when it comes to history. It's clear, though, that their professions of civil liberties or peace or wanting sane foreign policy is lip service only. They don't really care. That's not where their bread is buttered. That's totally ancillary to having Leviathan. They love Leviathan. They lick its boots, and if it has blood on its boots, oh well, no big deal. They'd much rather lick the boots of Leviathan than have a president who says that Social Security maybe should be private, or not be mandated. Who literally is saying that people should have a choice. And I don't know why that's so controversial, but it is. So you can't take these people very seriously when they talk about liking peace or whatever, and you can't take them if they refuse to even acknowledge that there's a difference between Ron Paul and, say, Rick Santorum or Herman Cain, then they are either unbelievably ignorant or they are intellectually dishonest, one or the other. I can respect the ones who say, well, yes, Ron Paul is even more radical than those other Republicans, and that's why I can't abide. I disagree with them, but at least they're being honest and saying, well, obviously he's a different shoe altogether. And there's a few. Bill Maher, for all of his innumerable flaws, says that he thinks that Ron Paul is the only genuine candidate. I actually don't agree with that because I believe one or two of the other ones are genuine, but they're just genuinely evil and bad. I think this is especially true of someone like Bachmann and maybe Santorum. The others, I don't think that they're genuine at all. This is rare, and I mean, it's frustrating to see when the two supposedly opposing parties agree on the most horrible things. And maybe they agree for different reasons, but I don't think so. I think it's nationalism in both cases. Overtly so with the Republicans, but even the Democrats. I mean, maybe Paul Krugman will say he thinks it will help the economy. Maybe he believes that, but at the bottom, at the end of the day, he loves the government. He wants the government to be big and powerful, and that makes him feel warm and fuzzy inside. And it doesn't matter what kind of butchery happens at their hands, he likes big government, and so he likes it so much that even when confronted with the evidence that the cost of big government is genocide and mass murder, then he'll negate his concerns for those things because ultimately he likes big government more than that. I've said it before, as long as Obama gives welfare to some poor guy in America, he can kill as many brown people or white people or Chinese people or black people as is happening now in Uganda or in Libya, where they're executing all the black people now, or not all the black people are getting executed. That's fine because we love big government, because as far as they're concerned, and they say this explicitly, government is the wellspring of all that is good and pure in society. The progression of society to them is the progression of state power, and that's what they believe in, that's their religion. And if there are negative consequences to that, it's like saying, yeah, people can get electrocuted now, but it's better that we have electricity. To them, that's what it is. Now, the idea that the state is the panacea, or if not the panacea, the wellspring of all that is good, is a fallacious argument. At the very basic level, it relies on the correlation-causation fallacy. There's prosperity, there's a state, hence the state cause. No, that's way too simplistic. That's not a rigorous empirical or theoretical case. And the fact that the state claims that it creates prosperity, that is not convincing evidence either. We can say, well, they think that they're doing something good, or at least they claim it. But we would need to analyze that a little bit before we just accept it as gospel, which they do. Unfortunately, and in this they don't differ that much from the Republicans. So, and I guess I can almost understand it because there are so many people who allegedly support free market small governments who are really just right-wing military socialists, that I can, I guess, understand a little bit why someone might think, well, because there are people who think we've had a free market economy and who advocate it, who say they favor a free market and they think that Bush was free market, and then people look at all the disparity in wealth and all the trouble and they say, oh, look what we got with a free market. Well, we have to think about this a little bit, people. Ron Paul hasn't been president yet, and we haven't had a Ron Paul country, and we haven't had a free market country in a long, long time. And I don't know. It just really bugs me that these people, say how compassionate and loving they are. But they don't give a shit as long as the people getting butchered are foreigners, or the people in this country. They can oppress people in this country too, just as long as the oppressor is the state. So, like, if I'm, this is so amazing. So if I own a business, and let's just use the most common example, and I kick a black person out because I don't like black people, that's the most evil possible thing I could do. Even though I'm just kicking him out of my store and denying him the ability to eat the food that I'm providing, which means he can go any place else, which means he can boycott me, which means he can raise holy hell in the papers. That's the most evil thing. But if the government comes and fucking throws people in prison because they drink raw milk, or arrests Amish people for selling unpasteurized cheese, or kills people because they're smoking weed, or not paying taxes, well, that's no big deal. That's good. I'm glad the state is attacking those people. The state needs to cramp down on people who cheat the state, because the state owns everything. And those bad niggers outside that don't do their work, they're bad, they're runaways, they're selfish, and they should be punished to the full extent of all the power and authority that all the tax-funded SWAT teams can muster against them. And it's just weird how, you know, I don't see how they compare. One of them is a lot worse than the other one, but it's exactly the opposite of the one that liberals and conservatives, for that matter, would allege. So these liberals are sickening, they're disgusting, they're hypocrites, they're liars, they're idiots, and all we can do is hope that some of them wake up, and I know it happens every once in a while. Usually it takes some kind of horrible life-altering experience, like the government aggressing against them in some way that if they had seen it done to somebody else, they would have lauded the government, but when it happens to them, they suddenly think it's unreasonable. Maybe these people just have a really hard time empathizing. I know that's the other thing. They always say, oh, they like to empathize, but then they kick, I mean, there's stupid regulations that destroy hope and, you know, opportunity. They just relish in that. It's, you know, when they like support minimum wage laws where they put poor people on the street and make them permanently unemployable, and then what do? Do they say, oh, you know, minimum wage, yeah, some people get hurt, but on that I think it's okay? No, they just pat themselves on the back and act like they just did everybody the hugest favor in the entire world by extending tyranny.